Good afternoon. I think everyone's officially afternoon in your time zone of choice. We are so glad you're joining us for the Federal Training Center Collaborative. We're going to give folks a few minutes, but while you're entering, we would love to have your name displayed on your profile. In addition to your name, we would love to see what your training center affiliation is. So this could be the name of your training center or what network you belong to. You'll see how we've done that with our panelists, but if you want to go ahead and make sure that your name and your training center identity is in your square, that will be super helpful just to know and understand who's in the room. All right. Everyone's coming in. This is so exciting. And we look forward to learning from you today too. So we hope they're ready to share your experiences and ideas. Okay, well, I show that we're 2 minutes after. So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. My name is Helen Burnside. I'm from the Denver Prevention Training Center, and I will be facilitating with an amazing group of panelists that I'm excited who have a few things to share with you, but we also, as I just mentioned, want to hear from you all. We are among colleagues, and this is a great opportunity for us just to share what we've been doing in this virtual world. We'll talk a little bit about how we got here today in the Federal Training Center Collaborative history in just a moment, but I want to pass it over to my co-facilitator, Victoria, to introduce herself.
Thank you, Helen. Welcome, everybody. So I will be co-facilitating, like Helen said. My name is Victoria Myers. I am a part of the Denver Prevention Training Center, where I coordinate some of our distance learning activities.
Great, thanks, Victoria. And I love what I'm seeing already is some chat engagement telling us who you are and your training center affiliation. So we want to know who is in the room. So if you haven't entered that into chat, please tell us your name and what training center you're affiliated with. And I see some friends that I'm so glad are here from our National Network of STD PTC network, as well as our SEBA provider network. Let's see. We're also seeing some folks joining from the Mountain Plains Prevention Technology Transfer Center, from the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence, some AETC program folks, New York PTC, some more STD PTCs. Yay, hi everyone, some Tuberculosis Center colleagues. Let's see who else we have. AIDS education and training centers from a couple different regions of the country, and a lot of our prevention technology transfer center. Van just told me all about that, and I got it right. I got the acronym right. Okay, great. Well, we are so happy. Oh, hi, Kelly from Curry. So happy to have you all here. So I'm going to start just kind of explaining how we got here today. I'm going to share this lovely graphic that we created that kind of demonstrates the training center makeup of the federally funded training centers. Some of you that have been around a while, like myself and Greg, may remember a time when many of us covered the HHS federal regions. That was a magical time. We all aligned on the same regions, and we were actually given federal resources to collaborate on projects. Over the past, I would say 7 years, many of our training center composition has changed in either that we've moved to national centers and less regional centers, or we have very interesting regions, like is the case for our national network of STD prevention training centers. But regardless, all of us are funded to train audiences, usually health departments, healthcare organizations, community-based organizations. And even though we don't have federal dollars that really support our regional collaboration as it once did, we still work together. And you all know this from collaborations that you're doing in the field right now. Recently, our Federal Training Center Collaborative has had an evaluation work group where we've been bringing together evaluators across all of these training centers to talk about strategies, how we're evaluating and learning from one another. And then in an email chain, several of us in the early days of COVID started reaching out to each other, wanting to hear what directives we were getting from our funder about what % of content to direct towards the virtual classroom. How are we thinking about this? What were we doing? So I love this network of colleagues and that we can still connect with one another, learn from one another. And that really inspired coming together today, now almost a year into this pandemic, to learn from one another around what strategies are working for us to engage our audiences, what's not working, and how can we improve. So that's a quick overview of our Federal Training Center Collaborative Network. For the agenda today, we have 3 sections. We have panelists who will be presenting in each section. We do not have slides. We will be taking about 3 or 4 minutes each for them to share a perspective, their perspective of what's working and what's not. And then within each of these session topic areas, we have about 10 or 15 minutes for you all to ask questions of the panelists, or just to share what you're doing, what's working, or if you have a barrier you want to get input from your colleagues on as well. So those sessions are, we're going to start with an overview of engagement strategies for the virtual classroom. And then we're going to go to approaches for addressing virtual burnout, which is real, especially now, and how to engage or call in your audiences. And then our third section is promising practices for production and facilitation. And again, we'll have time for discussion in each of those sections before we wrap up today. So that is really all that I want to share. We do have a second session that we'll share more about as we end our session today. And I'm going to turn it over to Victoria for some polling questions to kick us off.
Wonderful. Well, those will pop up on your screens at any moment. If for some reason they don't pop up on your screen, I went ahead and put them in the chat box so you can answer that way as well. But we're curious as to what virtual platforms your training center is using. You can select more than one. So you're using Zoom, Adobe Connect, WebEx, GoToMeetings, Microsoft Teams, or another one that I couldn't even think of. So please feel free to vote on that first one. You'll just scroll down for your second poll is what engagement strategies does your training center currently use for virtual training centers or for virtual training, which would be chat waterfalls, which is kind of like what we did, asking you all about your name and what training center you're with. Do you use polling like we're doing right now? Question and answer, which is another feature in Zoom where you can put some questions in there throughout today's presentations. Do you do verbal comments like in Zoom meetings or WebEx? Do you do virtual whiteboards, breakout rooms? And if you use other things, again, go ahead and put that in the chat. And then our third question, which is going to be at the bottom when you scroll all the way down, is how much of your classroom training content have you transitioned to virtual? We've got 4 different options: 0 to 25%, 26 to 50%, or 51 to 75%, and last, 76 to 100%. I'll go ahead and let you all take a few minutes to answer those. We've got about 60% of you all have answered. We've got some chat in the chat box. Word cloud with poll everywhere. Yes, those are always cool. They're fun. They're live. It changes on the screen. So if you are tech savvy, I love that one as an engagement tool for sure. We've got Mural as an option too. Google Docs and slides. I have to say Mural is really cool. I wish I were better at it because I would use it more. We'll take just about 5 more seconds.
And then I'm seeing Mentimeter. I haven't heard of that one. What about you all? Maybe tell us more in chat. What is Mentimeter?
Yes. Oh yeah, that one's come in a few times now, like 3 times. I have not heard that one either. So I'd love to definitely know more about it. I'm all about technology. If you couldn't tell,
it looks like a QI tool.
Oh, okay. So our QI people are probably the ones putting those in there. It's our own QI person from Denver, Terry, that let us know. So it must be a good tool. All right, well, we'll go ahead and share these results. An overwhelming 88% use Zoom. And is that coincidence because we're on Zoom? Who knows, maybe. A lot of people are using polling and breakout rooms. We've got Q&A kind of all over the board with engagement strategies, so that's great. Hopefully you all will be able to leave today with some more tools that our panelists are going to talk about. And 75% of you have put 76% or more of your classroom training content to virtual world. So that is a lot. So thank you for indulging us and taking those polls. It really will help our presenters, I think, kind of maybe tailor some of what they're going to let you all know today. Our first panel member of our session today is going to be Destiny Kelly. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Destiny.
All right, thank you so much, Victoria. I really appreciate it. My name is Destiny Kelly, and I am the coordinator for the National Network of Clinical STD Prevention Training Centers Coordination Center. And I hope that our experiences, lessons learned, and best practices can help improve both learner and trainer experiences and satisfaction. So one of the first things our network learned in a lesson was how to capture what type of virtual training was being delivered through our learning management system, sometimes called a registration and evaluation system. And we came up kind of with the following definitions that would work for our network, because there is a difference in between virtual classrooms and things like webinars. So webinars, like something like today, presented and delivered to a large audience for a duration no longer than 90 minutes, and usually is unidirectional video. A live web stream is usually unidirectional video with participant feedback through chat and/or audio. And didactic content lasts about 90 minutes or longer and can be over several consecutive days. A learning community is a bit different, typically planned monthly and delivered once per month, and a cohort goes through each session together. So an example would be a cohort that wanted to explore congenital syphilis and use peer-to-peer learning and bidirectional video in a community-like setting. And then we have virtual classroom, which I think we're most interested in. And this includes both didactic and application. So case studies, virtual skills practice, quizzes, and a virtual classroom environment with bidirectional video, everyone with their video cameras on, using some of those tools that we talked about in the polling. So much goes into interactive experiences for learners in the virtual classroom. And a good rule for the virtual classroom is that learners should be asked to participate or engage every 3 to 5 minutes. That's a lot. So for example, this could mean things like chat exercises, answering a question verbally, answering a poll, giving a feedback icon, working in a breakout group, or even writing on a whiteboard using the annotation. So this requires extreme multitasking for the trainer. And you're probably asking yourself, how are you going to do this? Well, the answer is we have a little secret for you. And that secret is we utilize what is called a producer. And a producer is not a co-facilitator or a co-trainer. A producer is someone like an administrative assistant, administrative for a program. We train them to be your technology person behind the scenes, so you as a trainer can focus on engaging your audience. So what does a producer do? A producer would pre-assign breakout rooms. If you're using something like Zoom, they would also preload polling, so that could be pulled up right away. And they would be the ones to pull it up, not you as the facilitator. As people come into the virtual classroom, they would do a class warm up with participants before the session begins, kind of like a virtual icebreaker. They would also handle technical issues for the participants and the facilitator. So instead of the facilitator trying to get someone's audio to work, that's what the producer would do. And the facilitator would only, or the trainer would only focus on the content. One of the best utilizations for a producer is a chat monitor. As you're as you are actually presenting the information, it is really hard for you to be able to see if you've got questions coming in the chat. So the chat monitor will alert you to what is being put in the chat. And they basically operate as a beacon of light. While you are focusing on the training content, they will take care of everything else. And you will learn to have a dance, kind of like Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire. So that's how we utilize the technology and let our facilitators and our trainers actually focus on the content while we do all these magical things behind the scenes. So I hope that's helpful for you. I'm now going to turn it over to my co-panelists, Judy and Liz.
Thank you, Destiny. Hi, everyone. My name is Judy Collins. I am the marketing coordinator at the AETC National Coordinating Resource Center. I am joined with my colleague, Liz Lazo, who is the program manager. Liz, say hi.
Hi, everyone.
So we're here today we're coming from a place of peace, and we're coming from the perspective of the actual participant. What's not in the literature really about how to facilitate virtual training or help to engage virtual training is the pandemic, of COVID pandemic, in which has thrown us all into the virtual world. And so we just want to offer some tips for when you are creating your training programs to consider that your participants are in a virtual world probably 24/7. They're not only teaching class, they're taking class online, they're dealing with patients, telehealth visits online. They may be, they're having several meetings within their own programs and conferences within their own programs. Online as well, they may be dealing with their children's, school or other meetings they're having at home off aside from working hours. So a couple of the tips that we wanted to offer for helping to facilitate the emotional support of the learner. One is to just read the room, to start your training, to kick off the session with a poll that gauges how your participants are feeling. This actually I picked up from a training that we attended at our center. The trainer actually had across the screen a selection of Fauci faces, which I thought was really funny and cute. And I think it was a nice way to kind of break the ice, get the training started. And it also helps to assess how to evaluate the training at the end. If everyone is putting in their chat that they are tired or they're overloaded or they're not feeling well, then that might actually give you some indication as to how you can evaluate the session on the end. Another tip, which we are actually using today, we're modeling that today, and this was just it's just synchronicity that it's happening this way because we didn't know that this is going to play out, but we often ask participants to turn their microphones off so that we don't hear any feedback from their end when we're in training. Similarly, I think it's helpful to turn your cameras off when it's appropriate. I understand that there are situations or instances where you have to keep your cameras turned on in order for to receive credit if you're in a training session, so that the facilitator or the trainer can see that you're actually paying attention, that you're modeling what's being trained or what's being taught. And so when it's more of a didactic or informational session, just to avoid seeing the distractions on folks' screens, what's happening behind them. Maybe there's a child playing in the background or a dog running around. They might have some crazy, great artwork that you're really staring at, and now you're not really listening to the presentation. So just a tip to keep in mind is ask participants to turn their cameras off during the presentation when it's appropriate and to turn them on for questions. And then finally, when we're in, Liz, did you want to join in?
Yes, I
Sorry.
just wanted to add to that particular because also I see in the chat that those there's some saying that trainers want to see the faces of the participants, the learners. So as Judy mentioned, that there's going to be different situations. Destiny mentioned the different types of learning sessions. So gauging those type of learning sessions ahead of time. So for those learning sessions where it is preferred or required the learner have on their camera, consider including that information in the registration description or reminder email. Give participants a chance to plan and be prepared to be on camera. So as Judy mentioned, that there are times that there are distractions or, so if they know ahead of time they're going to be on the session to receive credit or just for more engagement, give them a chance to know that they have to plan their environment or their day around that if possible. And then with the hopes that it will increase engagement and reduce background distractions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz. And then finally, just to take a break during your session. If you have a very long session or it's dense with information, if it's an hour and a half, or even if it's an hour, consider taking a short break during it. This is what we do when we are at in-person trainings. There's always a little coffee break or a bathroom break or just a few minutes to, if you need to use your phone, you need to return a phone call. Just consider adding that into your training program to give everyone an opportunity to step away from their computer and not feel like they're missing something. And here are some suggestions, is what participants might need to do in a break. But then during the break time, facilitators can also, play soft music, but also they can highlight a resource. They can post it on the screen. They can promote an upcoming event. So these are just some ideas that facilitators and presenters can do to fill up that space and that time if they feel like they need to, while participants are taking a break. And so those are just some few of our tips from the NCRC. And now I will pass it to Gary.
Thank you so much. I'm Gary Najaris, and I work with the High Impact HIV Prevention Capacity Building Assistance Network, or the CPN, which is a national network for folks who are building capacity in health departments and CBOs around HIV. And my tips and tricks are all around kind of the humanness of everyone that's on the presentation. It's very easy because we're all getting adjusted to the technology to forget that both all of us as presenters and participants are all human. So things like the tone and the cadence of your voice and varying that, we can inadvertently go into monotone during an online presentation. Try to speak when you're presenting like the person's really in front of you, and be careful with backgrounds because you'll notice disappearing hands like on my screen now, etc. So careful with those backgrounds and gestures. You want to challenge inattentiveness in a supportive way. We know learners are going to do other things on their computers. It's totally okay. It's part of working remotely, but you can use verbal cues to call their attention back to the screen. Like, this next slide is really interesting, or this graphic really shows something unexpected, and that'll reorient everybody's attention back to the screen for a moment to really make sure your important stuff is getting through. Destiny was talking about learning communities, and in any type of, especially a learning community, but other presentations, you can use peer-to-peer approaches like real case studies, and how folks similar to your key audience present on their successes and challenges, and then encourage the broader audience to share. And as part of that, you can even work with a plant. And this doesn't need to be secret or devious, but you might prep an audience member in advance to share an experience related to the topic that helps to kick off the discussion during that awkward quiet phase when we go to Q&A or sharing. You can even say, you can let folks know that this person has been prepped. You might say like, hey, Helen, I know your program has been doing some work around X. Would you mind sharing some of what you've learned? And so that way Helen's prepared to be able to do that previously to the call, but it gives that safety for others to begin sharing. And then If worse comes to worse and it's really quiet, you can always use that trusted and tried Socratic method, and ask an open-ended question, and then call on someone from the audience to respond. Definitely ask in your evaluation questions about the strategies that you used. So you can see what resonated more with folks. If you're using a poll for the first time, ask what folks thought about the poll. If you're doing breakouts for the first time, ask what folks thought about that and how the small group conversation worked. And my final point, always, and this is the most important, always think about how you want your learners to feel during your presentation and choose the tips and strategies, of which you've had many during our presentation, that make that happen. Your content will always be clear, but you want to leave participants with a feeling at the end of the presentation as well. So is that feeling that you want them excited to try a new strategy, that you want them to be reflective on lessons learned, or maybe you want them inspired to tell a story when they go back? So think about that feeling and infuse that feeling by the strategies that you choose and the type of engagement that you're doing verbally. And that's all for me. So I will turn it back to our lovely hosts.
Thank you, Gary. And I'll ask that our first set of panel members come back on camera while we do our Q&A. So we've had a lot of great comments in the chat. A lot of people talking about timers and ones that even have cute puppies. So if you like puppies, I know I've seen some that have cute little animals. I'm curious, for our panel members, what do you think was your biggest hurdle for your training center when it came to engagement, when all of a sudden we had to switch everything over to the virtual world? And while you're pondering that, I'll also prompt our audience members to go ahead and put any other questions you want to ask our panel members about anything that they've mentioned or you want to get a little more deeper info about.
I'll answer that, Victoria. I would say one of the great lessons learned is that you cannot prepare your learners enough before the session. Over and over again, email after email, same information after same information. Victoria's an expert at this. We got another panel link, not only yesterday, but we got a panel link about 10 minutes before we were supposed to be on here. And so just making it easier for your learners, for your panelists, is really key.
Thank you, Destiny. And I'll look at the panel and see if anyone wants to add anything else to that. If not, we do have a question in the chat about how timers are used. Do you place them within your slide set? So for anyone who uses timers in their trainings. I know what I've seen done before is in just going to YouTube. So I've seen people just share a YouTube of a timer, but I did see Helen unmute. So I'm curious as to what Helen was going to add to that.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We usually use YouTube ones. There's some, soft music, some bumping music. You can kind of read what kind of energy is needed for your group. And then we have the producer share their screen when everyone goes to break with the right amount of time.
So also, I think depending again on the length of this course that you're doing, I think something that we did with the COVID training that was really cool is one of the icebreaker questions had to do, what's your entrance, like what is your song? What is your entrance song? And we captured all of that, and then in Spotify grabbed it and made a playlist so that when we had breaks for the next 3 days, people were hearing the music that we knew they liked. So that was just, I think, a fun twist.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. I don't have Spotify, but I'll get somebody's. Awesome. And we just had a Q&A come in for Gary. Gary, can you talk a little more about the tone and infusing it into everything you are doing / presenting?
Absolutely. And there was also a question in the chat about coaching facilitators about being more engaging, and I think they relate to each other. We actually do some vocal exercises with our presenters. Sometimes it can be quick and on the spot, you know, the half an hour before the presentation. And there are great vocal exercises out there. This is a really intense field, you know, especially for folks who are singers or professional speakers. There's a lot of things that you can search on the web. And we often do these funny sessions in our conference room where we push all the tables aside and everybody stands up, and there's breathing exercises, and then, you know, almost sort of, it kind of reminds me of Lamaze a little bit, where you're doing a lot of hee-hees and a lot of hoo-hoos, but you're doing different, there's phrases and verbal sentences that help move the different muscles of your mouth and your tongue, that help you exaggerate your facial features. And it's a hilarious session, whether you do it in person, prepping folks, or on camera privately before your participants join. But it's a great way also to not only get all those that voice and facial stuff going, but get people to relax and laugh a little bit, which always makes presentations better.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. And I've seen a few comments about how it can just be very distracting, virtual learning. And Ariel made a comment earlier saying, reminding your learners of how they can change the video format. So they can, you know, hide their self view if they're finding that they're always looking at themselves, which can be distracting. You can hide yourself, get rid of it. You can have it so it's just on speaker view. And again, it all depends on which platform you're in, but you can try to help your learners understand the platform, so that way it does become a little less distracting for them. Any other questions?
I'm gonna call on.
Please.
No, I'm just gonna say I was gonna call on Destiny because she has a great tip sheet that everyone will get a copy of them after the call. But to and some of that is in there, is just for how to prepare your learner for all of the potential technical features that are going to be available during that session. So just that, so they're aware of where to click, what to do, how to set it up. You know, those are helpful tips. I don't know, Destiny, if you want to share some more of that.
Judy, we can definitely share after the call. We can put it in there.
Hey, I really like Dave's comment about bringing the energy when they use a standing desk. I think that helps all of us. If you're the one that's needing to present at the time, maybe stand up when you're presenting and probably bring some more energy. I think that's a great one.
Yeah, Donna, you stole my next thing I was going to say. You know,
Sorry.
preparation. No, you're totally fine. Preparation is key. And with preparation, knowing yourself. So are you someone that you need to be standing up to have some energy? Do you need to be sitting on an exercise ball? I do that from time to time. So what is it you need to also be engaging to your learners? And a lot of people, standing is a great one. I know some of our colleagues love standing, and they have standing desks in the office and at home. So it really is whatever works for you, and finding that and preparing for your training.
So Victoria, I wanted to go back really quick to your initial question about what has changed. And I will say that for the ATC and CRC, all our work for the most part is virtual, but what has changed is we would do a lot of community of practice sessions, which is smaller group monthly sessions. And with the COVID pandemic, we started to do national webinars, which is different. So what has shifted for us is in doing these webinars is learning that not everyone uses the same platform as we do. So when we have a presenter or a speaker who is not familiar with that platform, it is very helpful to do rehearsals prior to go quickly through the platform, ensure that they're familiar with how it's going to, for example, we use Adobe Connect versus Zoom. So Adobe Connect is very different and in some cases than Zoom, but that's been helpful to be able to kind of go through those steps with the presenters ahead of time, see what questions they may have and let them become comfortable. And of course, troubleshoot any issues that they're having so that the day of the presentation, we hopefully have already addressed that. But I think that was definitely a little bit of a learning curve in a sense because it's a shift in doing community practice versus a national webinar. So I just wanted to just bring that up as a tip.
No, it's much appreciated. It's going from being in the classroom and small to being online, a million different platforms. We're all trying to learn them and know them and master them. And it's just, there's so many out there. It feels impossible some days. But thank you all. Any last bits of information you want to offer our learners before we go to our next session? Okay, Helen, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you all so much. We appreciate your knowledge and wisdom on engagement and strategies.
Yes, that was great. Thank you. I was giving you snaps too, or a round of applause. Yes. All right. So our next session, we're going to talk about virtual burnouts, which we know our learners experience, and strategies that we have used to address this. So we are going to, again, have 3 people kind of share their experiences. I love all the chat conversations, so let's keep that up. And if questions come to mind for you while our panelists are presenting, you can go ahead and put those on chat and we'll queue those up for the Q&A portion. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Donna, from the Southeast TB Center to start us off.
Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Setzer, and I am with the Southeastern National TB Center. It's great to be here today. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about some things that we're doing in our center. We have been doing online training for quite some time, so that was helpful. We're doing a lot more of it now. But we find that following adult learning principles really helps us with the burnout. So I'm not going to be talking about hour-long webinars because we all know those are a lot of just watching someone speak, and I think there's huge burnout in that right now. We do use Zoom, and instead of taking an 8-hour class and putting it 8 hours online, we're doing a lot more of flipping the classroom. So anything that is didactic, we're having our presenters record those ahead in smaller chunks. So if it might be an hour presentation, we try to find places where they can break that up into more like 15 minutes so that people who are needing to watch that ahead of time can find small chunks of time when they're available. So we do have them, we flip it, we have them do the didactic before they show up for our online class. And then we keep our online class to 2 to 3 hours. And we find that people are very engaged. We're practicing what they've learned to make sure they can apply it. We're going into breakout sessions. We're having chats. People are coming off mute to comment. So that's working really well for us. We are also, again, this is something beyond just a webinar where you might have 100 some odd people on it. But if you're doing a class, an online class, we're emailing no-shows at about 5 minutes into the class and just saying, hey, I noticed you're not here. We've started class. We hope you can join. And we have found that we get about 50 to 75% of those no-shows showing up, or someone telling us, oh, I'm so sorry, this emergency came up. I can't attend. I'm going to watch the recording. So that does make a difference to touch base with your no-shows really quickly and see if you can get them in. We all know, since we're not getting up and going to a class, it's really easy to forget that online class is happening. We're also doing breakout rooms at the end of class. So we're all used to that opportunity to talk to the speaker during a break at the podium. And our doctors love that. Our participants love coming and talking to the doctors on their one-on-one thing that they want to talk about during a break. And what we've done is we create a breakout room at the end of class. We actually create 2. One is to meet with the doctors. And again, if there were, we could do several. We could do one for each doctor, but right now our presenters have asked that we just do one, and people can go to that or they can leave. And then the other one we do is a technical support. So if someone's having a hard time, not necessarily on Zoom, but their pre-work that they're doing, and we use the Canvas learning management system, they can step into that and say, hey, I'm struggling here. I couldn't watch the video, whatever it might be, but they know. The first week of that class, we find we have quite a few people in the technical support. And then after that, it's usually empty. But every week we have probably 6 to 8 people who stay on and want to talk to the doctors. We make sure that it's that breakout room will end in 30 minutes for the benefit of our doctors, because they don't want to tell people that they can't stay, but I think people would stay and talk to them for hours if they could. So, so that's what we're doing. And I think I covered all of it, but yeah, definitely keeping our time on Zoom to like 2 to 3 hours at any given time. We're not doing full day classes. And with that, I'll turn it over to Barbara Wilgus.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Wilgus. I am with the STD HIV Prevention Training Center at Johns Hopkins. So we're one of the regional prevention training centers under the national network of PTCs. We have, if you're a HRSA funded organization, we have Region 3. Plus we have 2 additional states to that. We have Tennessee and Kentucky. And I do want to take a second to give a shout out to my entire Mid-Atlantic Training Center collaborative. We're highly collaborative in our region, and we even in real life did collaborative trainings together and have continued that in the virtual space. It's been very helpful because then that gives us a variety of platforms that we can use, because some centers have Adobe Connect, you know, as their main one that they're licensed to. Our center has Zoom. Some others might have others that they're able to use. And so it kind of gives us a bigger variety. So I would encourage everyone, if you haven't reached out to the other regional training centers where you are, definitely do it, because it's so fun to work together in a big collaborative group. But on the topic of burnout, I actually had my admin do a little look-see to kind of see how much time we had left. And we wind up having about 55% or more who have attended our trainings. And the key thing, we didn't change our time format. If we have a 3-day training, it's the same amount of time that it is in the real world. But we do, what I would say helps is being very clear about what your agenda is, and keep to that. So for example, I am not a fan of pre-recorded lectures just as a participant. If they are to be watched at some other time and then come back to the live session. That's just my preference from 2 national conferences now, largely because I didn't anticipate or know that that was going to be expected. And so I didn't put in the time to watch them. So I didn't have the time. So those are just things to consider. And I'm going to pass it along. I talk so fast and I never have enough time. I am going to pass it off to Gary Naja-Reese.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Again, this is Gary from the HIV Capacity Building Assistance Network. And I'm going to ask everyone, just make sure your feet are on the floor, make sure your hands are comfortable on your chair. I'm going to ask everyone just to take 3 deep breaths. So I'm going to ask you just to do a gentle inhale and hold, and then exhale, and then a second inhale and hold for a moment, exhale and hold for a moment at the bottom as well. Let your body tell you when it needs that 3rd breath, and then go ahead and breathe in and release that again. Thank you for doing that. That exercise is actually called Moment to Arrive. It's a simple breathing and reorienting technique to give people just a little bit of space to settle in and be ready to listen and learn. It's actually part of what's called a trauma healing approach. I'm sure many of your centers and trainings have trauma-informed approaches in them. So as you know, in the continuum there's trauma causing, trauma informed, and then trauma healing. And so there are a variety of techniques out there in the world that are trauma healing approaches. And this is a great one because we're all running and switching so fast from meeting to meeting. We can easily forget why we're even there. We can carry sort of that harried and sick feeling of being rushed or unprepared along with us as someone's starting to talk about a really interesting topic. But just that simple 3 breaths at the beginning of a meeting is great to just reorient and just be in your chair, be in front of the screen for a moment, and kind of remember why you're there and what you're supposed to be doing. Additionally, there are other tools out there that can help with some of this. So with just kind of focusing and relaxing for a moment, or sharpening attention. There was one that I used recently with a group. You can actually download from Pinterest adult coloring pages, and many tools like Zoom and others have things where you can actually color on the screen. And so all the participants can be coloring together and creating something. It was an excellent way to start off a topic that had a lot of science and data in it, because folks were able to focus, work on something together, and see the screen really erupt in color. Literally, it took 4 to 5 minutes. And there was this great thing at the end. You can also offer some incentives to your participants that help them combat burnout at home. For some folks, that might be, a couch yoga handout. Others, it might be, you might be able to get a free subscription for all your participants in a training to a meditation app, for 30 days or something like that. Which can be, so looking at what incentivizes folks to be able to be taking care of themselves on a regular basis. Also, we've done walking meetings, and this depends on the kind of training that you're doing or the kind of session that you have, but you can encourage folks to do a walking meeting where everyone takes their phone and headset with them and gets some fresh air while getting things done. It's great for long Q&A sessions. It's great for breaks where folks might be networking with each other. Sometimes I just even pace back and forth in the backyard and don't go too far away from the Wi-Fi. And then finally, adults need to fidget with their hands to learn. And so you can send participants in advance a small package of pipe cleaners or one of those baby Play-Doh cans so they have something to fiddle with. What I'm actually doing off camera is my pen. I'm constantly screwing it and unscrewing it, disassembling it and reassembling it in my hands, because adults learn if they're doing something, if they're fidgeting. And so where you don't want kids to do that in a classroom, you actually do want adults to be fidgeting. So, and that can be also part of a care package that goes out to them so that, again, it shows that you're investing in them and that you care about their well-being at all. But nothing like getting a few pipe cleaners and some baby Play-Doh in the mail before intensive training and being encouraged to fidget. So I'm going to turn it back now to Helen and Victoria to keep moving us forward.
Awesome. This was so great. I learned so many things. I love, Donna, how you tend to your no-shows. And I love the conversation, Donna and Barbara, you both had around how much content is pre and not and how that works. These are all decisions we're making. And then coloring, breath, all of these things are so helpful. So thank you all for sharing. There's a couple of questions I just want to go back to in the chat. And again, you all are welcome to ask more or share more as we get going. But Donna, if you can clarify, so your recorded sessions, are those recorded lectures that you send the link to, and then there's a quiz for completing all of them, or just talk a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, so we had started doing this with even our face-to-face, and so it became easy to, the part where the presenter is just talking, we do have that now pre-recorded and they can watch it ahead of time. We strongly encourage them to watch it ahead of time because we won't be going over that material. We'll be using that material for them to actually be engaged in the class and apply it to their case studies or whatever we might be doing. One interesting piece of that's come out is we're finding people go back to them. So they watch them. We have a really pretty high, especially if after they attend the first class and see that we really aren't going to be going over that material, and if they want to know what's going on, they should watch it ahead. And we find they watch it again throughout the course. And it's there available for them even after the course is done. So that's been worked really well for us.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Okay, and then Gary, there's a question for you about your background, and if your name is part of your background. If you want to talk about your background, that would be great.
Yeah, so what we did, and we were actually inspired by the Denver Prevention Training Center and their fabulous backgrounds. We found some photos, some of offices, some of San Francisco on the web, and we were able to download those because they were free. And then we were able to just, it was a quick thing in Photoshop, but you could do it pretty much anywhere where you can edit a photo, but we were able to just lay over like a white box and just pop in our logo and name. And that's been really helpful because depending on the size of your screen, you can't always see everybody's full name or organization, or how to remember how to get in touch with them. So we kind of popped it up there to make it easy, but it's basically just a shape with some words in it, and our logo like over a photo. So that's not my real office in the background, that's fake.
Great, thanks for sharing. Yeah, and we've had some lessons learned with backgrounds around color and kind of, as you can see, where do you put the name? So that takes some playing around with, but they've been a great tool too. And I think sometimes we've given them to learners too, and learners feel a little bit more comfortable maybe coming on video if there's a child or they're living in a shared family situation. So I know it also helps learners feel more comfortable about coming on camera depending on their situation.
One other thing, Helen, I've seen folks share a pack of backgrounds related to a training in advance. So participants can upload it to their Zoom or whatever else they're using. So that, again, might be part of a care package that you share with folks. It won't have their names, but it's something that, again, helps protect that privacy.
Great, I love that. I really like the idea of incentives too. I had that happen for a recent course I attended, and I felt so special and ready to join on a Saturday. And then also some conversation around green screen. So it sounds like some of us do, some of us don't. I think what we've learned with backgrounds is proper lighting, making sure that we tell folks about having, if possible, natural light. I'm in the basement right now, so it took me a while to figure out my lighting, but I have lighting behind my computer screen. So that is critical. We find that if you don't have a green screen, that's fine. It's just all about the proper lighting in front of you. If that makes sense. Okay, Victoria, did you see anything else come in question-wise that I missed?
I have not seen any other questions. I see we have Dave, who's an advanced user though with technology and backgrounds, it seems though. So kudos to you, Dave. We'll have to use you for your services.
All right, well, panelists, we have a couple minutes. Anything else you want to share? Closing thoughts?
I just want to say on the topic of burnout that, I think it's okay for us as trainers also to be kind of, forgiving of ourselves as well as of our participants too, because, we're all pretty darn burned out in some kind of way. And so kind of acknowledging how, I say this as a provider anyway, acknowledging how you feel inside and acknowledging how that might make you feel about how a training's going. And just, participants seem to be pretty forgiving. Like we've all learned this whole virtual world, together. So we're in it together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that humility or recognition goes a long way at the beginning of opening up the virtual classroom, just to acknowledge. I will often say, I'm going to practice screen hygiene and I'm really tempted to keep up with my email right now, but I really want to be here with you all and I'm going to close that. So I think as much as we model that and own it as trainers, that goes a long way for our audience. So thanks for sharing, Barb.
One other thing that one of my teammates just brought up, when we provide the videos, we also provide the transcript if someone just wants to read it. And we also provide it as an audio file if someone would like to listen to it while they're on one of their walks or they're commuting in the car or any of that. And again, it's available for accessibility that's the primary reason we do it, but it has a lot, a lot of people have said, oh yeah, this is great. I can just listen to it, on my walk. And as we all know, we probably don't need quite as many slides as we have. So I think they're getting most of what they need by listening to what the presenter is sharing in their presentation.
Great, thanks, Donna. I like that option of the audio file. That's great. Okay, well, thank you, panelists. Next round of applause. I'm going to pass it over to Victoria for our final panel.
Thank you. Well, it's hard to believe it's already been an hour almost. So speaking on all these burnout things, my other half has a rule of it, the 20-20 rule. So don't think of last year, but we've been looking at the screen for 20 minutes. Look away for 20 seconds. So you're giving your eyes a break. And that's one that I think I try to be better about, because our eyes need breaks, but we don't give them. So moving on to our final discussion, it is all around promising practices for production and facilitation, aka all the behind the scenes stuff that we don't always think about. So up first, we have Van Wilson.
Oh gosh, Am I upside down?
You are upside down.
Oh, okay, there we go. Oh, and is my mic?
Yeah, sounds good. Oh, no.
Is it good?
There
okay.
we go.
All right. Okay, I'm pulling everyone's leg here just a little bit. I'm here today to talk a little bit about transitions. I'm with the Collaborative to Advance Health Services. We're located at UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City. We have 5 national technical assistance centers within our group. We call ourselves the Collaborative to Advance Health Services, 1 regional center, and we have about 10 other smaller grants that are focused on training and technical assistance. And so I work 100% on our Prevention Technology Transfer Center, or the PTTC as we call it. So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk just a little bit about transitions between your webinar elements. It sounds like my object lesson made a little bit of an impression here. And for all your foodies out there, having smooth transitions is like having the right amount of salt in your food. So you don't notice it when it's just right, but if it's wrong, you're definitely going to notice it. Poor transitions, I would argue, are probably the most common thief of our precious webinar minutes. I would be interested to do a poll to see how many webinars we host that actually make it within the time frame. And they can quickly spoil the attention of our audience. And I'm sure we've all seen this and been on the receiving end of that as well. So my tip might not be terribly revelatory for folks, but it's to practice your transitions. I hope that you're doing a practice session before your events, before your webinars. And this is more towards the 1 to 2 hour webinar type events, this tip. But I find that many presenters during the practice want to focus mostly on the content. And what I want to focus on from a production standpoint is our transitions. And so what that looks like for us is going element to element and actually practicing the transition. And we'll set the stage, exactly what it needs to look like during that next session or during that element. Something to consider on your agenda, you could add a scene column next to it that says that describes who's doing what the screen needs to look like, what the scene needs to look like. And finally, I just find that this is especially important if you have many people sharing content throughout the presentation. I'm sure we've all been on webinars, probably dozens of webinars, where the transition will get botched or somebody shows up upside down for some reason, and then you've lost a minute or two, or maybe even more if the audio or the video hasn't been set up right. So that's my tip that I think we've learned in the last year or so of doing these things virtually within the collaborative. And I'm going to hand it off now. See, I didn't have my agenda right here in front of me. Greg Melhoff, sorry.
Thank you, Van. Hello, everyone. Greg Malhoff with the California Prevention Training Center. And my most intensive focus lately has been on our Disease Intervention Training Center and our Case Investigation and Contact Tracer training program for CDC throughout the country. So I want to talk a little bit about production. And because we've been doing everything virtually and we're doing skills-based, 3 days, about 4 hours per day in one of our programs, and then and also doing summits, virtually doing summits, town halls, etc., where we have a lot of production aspects, a lot of different moving parts, and a lot of different people involved. Sometimes as many as 300 participants and moving them around to breakout rooms, etc., and concurrent sessions. So production is a big issue, and we, because of the volume of training that we were anticipating to be doing and the need to standardize the training across multiple centers, we developed production guides. So Denver PTC sort of helped with this. They took some of our original notes and put them into table format, and we've taken that further and developed it even further. And let me quickly share my screen, just so you can get an idea of what it looks like. So in these, we have very detailed information about all the aspects of production. And we feel that anyone who is skilled in any given platform could pick up the production guide and successfully produce a training based on what's given in these documents. It doesn't matter if it's Zoom or GoToWebinar, whatever. As long as it has the aspects, that are needed here. So, so that was important. So we include agenda, we include roles and responsibilities. We usually have 2 producers just as a backup, one to make sure that we're not, if my system goes down, someone else can cover me. Timing for each module, so everybody knows exactly what is expected. Slide for cues for when different things polls are launched, or participant materials are put into the chat, when to play videos, etc. Detailed breakout room guidelines for setting that up. And we create materials in, let me get to the chat, for our learners. We also put them into the chat, and I'm going to put this document in the chat for you. And I know my time is just about up, so I will soon. And then another quick thing. So this will be shared with you, and we have multiple facilitators, and we have them name themselves by like F1, F2, F3. So that helps us put them into the breakout rooms correctly. And then another really helpful thing that we have found is using text messages to communicate between facilitators and trainers and the production staff, because you can't always do that in the chat. If they're in another room, they can't chat with us in the production room. So use some sort of texting program. And I will end there and hand it off to my great friend, Gary Najaris.
Hey, it's Gary again. So just a couple of tips from my end. We've talked back and forth a little bit in the previous 2 presentations about pre-recorded elements. We actually use a hybrid of those sometimes. What? Hybrid? How can you have something pre-recorded and live at the same time? What we do is have the presenter, especially presenters who may be a little nervous or maybe who tend to read, their material. We might have them pre-record, but the presenter is actually on live while the recording is running. They can sometimes put magical comments in the box and people wonder, how are you presenting and typing at the same time? You must be awesome. But then they're right there if questions or other things come up, or if there's any kind of snafu in the pre-recording or anything like that. One tip around the production piece that we have gotten tripped up on a lot is sharing videos or web elements in your trainings, no matter what the tool you're using, that has sound. Visuals are easy to share and they happen pretty automatically in most tools. But if you're trying to share the sound that's coming from the internet, there's usually additional things you have to click on, and it takes some digging to find those. And we've made the mistake of learning that lesson in the middle of presentations sometimes. So definitely something you want to look at in that pre-production stage and test it out as much as you can. The other piece is like really use the best equipment that you can, whether it's video and audio. Normally all the built-in cameras and things are 1080p these days, which is, you know, the highest resolution, same as your TV. Folks can usually see you fine, but what can be sketchy is audio. Especially if you're doing audio through your computer at the same time that you're doing the visuals and the other web elements. So it may be worthwhile to invest in a more professional microphone that plugs into your computer. When we use certain tools, we have presenters dial in for audio and do video and presentation on the computer to save bandwidth. So again, this is a lot of stuff that you can test out in your pre-production to see what's the best in being able to have folks be able to hear and see most effectively. Breakout rooms are your friend, but definitely practice them in advance. They really help folks to have small group interaction. Usually we do 5 or 10 minutes depending on the intensity of the question. It really depends on what you need folks to do. If it's something more intensive, it can be longer, but normally we just do it as a quick strategy just to get folks to be networking and meeting each other a little bit more. We also use a website for interaction and communication between participants in advance. We're primarily using it in our learning communities, but we do use it for some other webinars and other things. It's a great way to track if pre-work is getting done. It's a great way to start discussions on topics and get questions in advance or continue the discussion after a session. And you can disseminate your incentives electronically to folks as well, rather than making them wait for like a gift card in the mail or something like that. You know, there's always those little codes that you can send to someone individually. And then just finally, really evaluate the technology that you're using. Ask your presenters and the other folks who are sharing content on your call what their experience with the technology was, and do a little quality improvement conversation, but also ask a question or two about the technology in your evaluation survey, especially if you're using something new or have switched to a new tool, or have used a different type of technique, because what you might hear from folks is that they really want to keep it going. So I think we're perfectly on time, so I'm going to hand it back to Helen and Victoria.
Thank you, Gary. That was perfect timing. So while our last panelists come back on camera, Van, thank you for that entertainment. Helen and I were texting about that just now. We didn't know that was planned. So kudos to you for some entertainment for us in this hour. That was wonderful. Hopefully that goes viral and you can be the new cat person if anyone has seen that.
If only.
Well, we've had some great discussion again. Barbara, thank you for pointing out Greg's point of having facilitators identified for your breakouts. So with that, we had a question is, what is the maximum amount of people you think should be in a breakout session?
I'll say, I think it depends on what the activity is. So if it's practicing role plays, we'll sometimes do 2 people. If it's very intense role play, sometimes 3, to take turns. If it's more of a discussion, 5 or 6. It really depends on what we're doing.
Yeah, I think on that point, again, back to one of my earlier comments about what you want participants to feel, it's like, what do you really want them to be feeling while they're in that breakout? Is it that you want lots of ideas popcorning? Is it that you want something more intensive happening? So I think based on what you're trying to get out of them will really help lead how many should be in there.
Yeah, so again, a lot of what we've been doing is skills based. So we're trying to get people to learn doing case investigation or contact tracing and following a script. So it's a very sort of intensive work versus a more of a discussion group.
Yeah, I think what popped into my head, I'll just add really quickly, is that I think it's inversely related to engagement. The more people you have, I feel like the fewer people will be engaged.
Yeah, and Helen added the comment for skills-based training. They've found they really need a facilitator in the room. So making sure people are, focused, paying attention, actively engaged, and trying to learn stuff.
Yeah, and that's quick, if I can really quickly, that's one of the things with the naming of the facilitators, like F1, F2, F3. So if we have 10 rooms, 5 facilitators, F1 starts out in room 1, they get them going, then they go to room 6. F2 starts in 2, then they go to 7. Just to keep it organized, because we have found out that learners do appreciate some level of support, at least when they start getting things going.
I know I've appreciated it when I'm in trainings like that. So I'm sure it just continues on with everyone else. And we did have another question about there being any particular production companies that we would recommend who understand our work well. And it was from an anonymous attendee. So if that person wants to let us know what kind of work in particular, since there are a lot of training centers on this call, you can send a private chat to myself or Helen. But if any of our panelists have a recommendation, if you've used any.
So this is Gary. We are fortunate to be placed at a health department. And because of that, our health department actually has a production facility. It's called SF Gov TV. And primarily their role is, having the Board of Supervisors meeting on TV and doing other creative things. But we discovered just several years ago that they are open to all departments, and they will come out with a professional video camera and audio equipment. They'll film for us. They have a studio that we can go into if you want that little set that looks nice when you're recording something or even broadcasting it live. They have the live capability as well, but they also have the ability to do animation on the screen and make those little stick figure videos that teach people something. So in terms of mixing things up, and because it's a internal and government service, it's really cheap. It's like $80 an hour, no matter what you ask them to do. And so other health departments may have something similar where they can pull on some video production internally. So that's just one that we've used.
Yeah, Greg, you brought up a good point in chat. If you're connected to a university in any way, reach out to them. They are underutilized by most of us, and they're inexpensive and really good. So if you're thinking you want to do some professional videos or any of that type of stuff, especially now that they're more and more doing online work in their world, they have those resources available.
Thank you. Yeah, and we've had a couple in the chat as well. So the Mentimeter was mentioned again, Rev for transcripts and closed captioning. So yeah, definitely check out all of those.
Yeah, we use Rev and they are very quick. So if you're wanting to get that pre-recorded video out there with the text right away, they're less than 24-hour turnaround.
Oh, wow, that's good. Awesome. For recommendations like that, those are good for all of us to know. So we have another question. As you've all shifted from working from home, have your agencies provided technologies, a camera or a better camera, or infrastructure costs at your home, new router, Wi-Fi extender?
I'll just jump in. I did get a new webcam, a nice high definition webcam for this. I had a previous audio setup that I use, that I'm using today. Hopefully my mic sounds really great. But there's cheap USB microphones that Gary mentioned before that even the entry level will really improve the audio quality. And just getting a couple lights. I've got some nice lights next to my monitor here, like we've mentioned before. But with the video production, or at least the stuff that we're involved in, I wouldn't call it high budget at all. If you really wanted to get super high production value, I would say maybe even $1,000 would get you the best of the best for webcasting. And if anybody wants some recommendations on that, I'd be happy to provide some of those. Dave Clausen, he's a colleague of mine, has also done a lot of good research into this as well and has some great tools.
For us, one thing we've been able to do is effectively use carryover funds, or when you're getting close to the end of your budget year is a great time to really have this stuff in your pocket. What we've been able to do is not only buy some good equipment for our own presenters, but buy a few spare ones that, especially with learning communities or a series of trainings where we're in a long-term relationship with someone, we will lend them like a Microsoft video cam, or even just a simple microphone that plugs into their computer so they don't have to use their internal one. We mail it to them. And we also stuff in there a self-addressed stamped envelope thing to come back to us at the end of the training. And people are great about it. They appreciate it so much because normally their health departments don't give them the best equipment, or community-based organizations. The other thing we've been able to do is think ahead about when the next time your computer is going to get upgraded for any reason. I know it doesn't happen very often, but we were able to think ahead for that in our organization and buy laptops instead of desktops that had better audio and video capability under our approved, schemas for the department. And that helped our staff really get set up with things that then share everything much more effectively.
Okay, yeah, and it looks like in the chat, we've got some similar kind of things that organizations are supporting the equipment like cameras, audio, but it looks like no one is supporting internet services. And I know that's the same for our organization.
That's true for our center also. I'm someone who's been working from home for 13 years. Nobody has ever paid for my internet. You can write it off on your taxes if that works for you. If you are using your space, you can write some of that off on your taxes.
Thank you, Donna. And Donna, while I have you, I had a question come in, scrolling back up to it. It was about CE. So how is your pre-recording work and CE and all of that?
Yeah, so we do offer CE for that because they would be getting it if they were face-to-face. So it's just part of our class. And that's probably easier than figuring out how much time it takes someone to do an activity. We're able to just take the amount of time of that session, of that pre-recording, and say, that's an hour's worth of the 15-hour CE that we're doing. So we just wrap it all in there as one set of CE numbers.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions for our production wizards that we have had here today? Or any of our other sections that we've had? So any of our burnout folks or our virtual engagement folks we've had talk. We'll leave a couple seconds. We can do some stretches, think about
something I'll add in. I found it, we were fortunate enough to be able to work with Denver on the COVID training and learn so much from them. So I think it's one of these, we're all, as partners, even if it's just joining the back end of someone's session to see how things are running and get ideas from them. Again, we learned a whole lot. We've been doing online stuff for years, but we grabbed a few new ideas by doing this with the Denver Training Center.
That goes back to, go ahead, Greg.
Just quickly add that in the document that I sent, the production document, you'll notice all the links in there. So we use those links because those can be updated in our system, in our learning management system. So the link always stays the same, and the most updated material will always be at that link. And especially with COVID, that has been extremely important because things change so rapidly. And we're working with 4 different training centers nationally. So it's one way of, if you can keep things standardized and so that you don't have to get up a new link every time something changes, is really helpful. Or a new document. This way it's always there, it's ready to go.
Thank you, Greg.
One last thought that just popped into my head because of the cold snap. They were doing rolling blackouts in our area, just having redundancies if you're really hosting something that can't be rescheduled, whether that's a hotspot or someone else that can host in your stead. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got to be able to roll with it. That's why we're recording this too, so that way you can share it with colleagues and such. But everything's about collaboration. So everyone observe each other in sessions, work with your training centers. There's a large amount of us on this call, and everyone wants to collaborate and learn from each other and really offer the best to whoever is coming to your trainings. So I want to thank all of our presenters for that last section, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Helen.
All right. Well, I just have one question I have to ask before I close us out. Is Van, how do you turn yourself upside down?
You can actually do it in your Zoom video settings is one way, but I use a open broadcast software that helps me put all of my stuff together and put it here.
Okay. There you go. Had to know. All right. Well, thank you all. A round of applause for our panelists. I think this was so great to talk amongst ourselves. I walked away with new tools and strategies that I'm definitely going to take back. And I think it's just good to know that we're all in this boat together. We've all had to learn a lot over the past 12 months. I really appreciate continued focus on the learner. What do we want them to feel? What do we want them to think? What are the outcomes? I think when we first started transitioning content to virtual, we were just in this hurried state to take the same thing and put it in virtual. And I think we've all been on this journey and learned that it is really about what we want to achieve, and we're planning that in the beginning. So I appreciate kind of how the conversation went that way. It really shows how far we've come in a year. So we will be posting a evaluation in the chat momentarily. We want to hear from you how this was, if this was helpful, what we could do to be better. As a reminder, we do have another session, and we want to also hear from you in that evaluation. Do you have thoughts about what other topics would be useful? Do you have something that you want to share? You could be up here turning your camera upside down for the next session. So we want to hear from you and a diverse group of presenters from training centers too. We'll also post the registration link for that second session, which is on Wednesday, March 17th. We can wear green and same time as well. And then we will be following up with an email post session with some of the documents, just in case you didn't grab those, as well as the recording from today's session that you're welcome to share with colleagues. And then we'll share some contact information for our core planning group. I want to give a shout out to Judy and Liz and Victoria, who have really been helping plan this, from emails to a few phone calls to, is this a good idea? Should we do this? And now we're here doing it. So thanks, Judy, Liz, and Victoria, for all your work. And anything else from the panelists that you want to share before we dismiss learners? Thank you all for all that you're doing to support your training center networks. Let's keep collaborating, growing stronger, and getting better. But that is all that we have for you. The panelists will stay on till the top of the hour. If you want to get some more information in chat, just let us know. But thank you all. Be safe, stay hydrated, wear your mask, take walks, call a colleague.